Hello and welcome to AITPM News. And in this week's news we hear of Doncaster's bus rapid transit proposal is now on the backburner. Has light rail passed its use-by date? Improving noise reduction from roads. And finally, virtual reality as an effective traffic engineering and transport planning tool. In July 2017, global public transport company Transdev put forward a proposal for a new Doncaster bus rapid transit project. The project was supported by Manningham Council, and positive comments from a variety of areas included that it would reinvent public transport and vastly improve commuters' public transport experience in the eastern suburbs. The project was an unsolicited proposal, but the Victorian government has turned the offer down. This may not mean that this concept is totally lost, but Alan Davies, who writes as The Urbanist for Crikey.com, notes a particular concern.
In this particular case, one of the key criticisms is that the government hasn't explained why it's rejected the proposal from Transdev for the Doncaster BRT, so we're all in the dark.
So, is there a better solution?
The only thing we really know, I'd say, is that Infrastructure Victoria has analysed, the whole suite of infrastructure projects across the state and assessed the need to provide improved bus transit in the Doncaster area. A lot of debate here over decades now, about whether there ought to be a rail line. Infrastructure Victoria basically said, no, that just doesn't work. But there needs to be improvements to the bus system. That's the solution. But they said it's not needed for 5 to 10 years.
Do you think that we've tended to have the view that it's rail or nothing? Do you think the government has a long-term plan for the breadth of transport issues that might be available?
Well, I hope they do. They haven't issued. The only one they've issued that's long-term is the network development plan you mentioned. That's about rail. We don't have a long-term infrastructure plan, that you can point to on a map for buses. We don't have it for trams. We don't have it for cars and trucks.
In the light of the Victorian government's rejection of a rapid bus transport proposal for Melbourne, might light rail be an alternative? The experience in America, according to an article in the well-researched Atlantic City Lab website, suggests that the value of light rail is very questionable. They have just published an article titled "Enough with the Streetcars Already." There is nothing anti-transit about the City Lab. Rather, it is striving to be realistic, a sort of tough love. The article notes that Portland, Kansas City and Washington DC streetcar systems are doing quite well, but rides on these lines are still free. The Detroit Q line saw a 40% and Atlanta saw a 60% drop in ridership after they started to charge a small fare for each trip, although I don't think it is as simple as price. Milwaukee is tearing up roads now to build a light rail of its own, and New York may get one, but possibly in the wrong place. Some have proved to be successful from a real estate point of view, while at the same time having protests from social justice organisations. The point is that they are hugely expensive, and so while some small sections might be built, communities struggle to fund complete systems. CityLab described the situation for streetcars in America as often being pokey, infrequent and generally disconnected from other transit. Portland is an exception. The answer is to build a more complete system, and this is much more likely with priority to buses, preferably with their own corridor. Modern technology, including autonomous vehicles, will allow busways to operate with efficiencies approaching or equalling light rail and with greater flexibility. The AITPM newsletter recently covered a story about how much more attention is being given to landscaping and noise reduction on major road projects. An Australian Association of Acoustical Consultants recently expanded their territory by including New Zealand. We spoke to two consultants, Alex Campbell, Infrastructure Section Leader and Technical Director at SLR Consulting, and Mark Russell, Lead Engineering on the West Connex project, and also from SLR Consulting. Mark notes that there are differences in state requirements for sound barriers.
There are some significant differences in criteria. For example, New South Wales criteria uses a different descriptor to what Victoria and some parts of Queensland uses. They also have different methods of optimising barriers and optimising heights of barriers. New South Wales has a very robust and technical approach to the assessment of road noise. It's a little bit simpler in other states.
Transparent barriers have been suggested in some locations.
They can work just as well as solid barriers. They are often more expensive, being the main hurdle, but certainly they let light through, they let views through. It's in areas where there's security concerns about barriers and people hiding behind them and things like that. They're a good solution there.
The downside with transparent barriers, they're generally a perspex material is the graffiti and actual maintenance of the barrier. So they tend to get scratched, or the transparency reduces over time, and that doesn't, I guess, appear as nice as other barriers do. So sometimes in some projects they're used in combination with a solid barrier below and the perspex on top to allow the overshadow, or to reduce any overshadowing issues.
A more detailed account of our conversation will appear in the November newsletter. Virtual reality is well known in the gaming industry, but now many professions are realising its potential. AITPM Queensland National President, Kyriakos Tirologos, presented a paper at our national conference titled Virtual Reality for Transport Planning, What TMR Staff Had to Say. His introduction to a range of staff members at TMR shows that virtual reality can make a valuable contribution to transport planning. Over a period of 9 months, more than 70 people from Transport and Main Roads experienced a demonstration of virtual reality applications in transport planning and traffic engineering. Their feedback from their experience was very positive. Kyriakos explains one of the reasons why.
With the 3D drawing, things can get better, but then again, we tend to miss the scale of things. Virtual reality is a tool that gives you the real-life perspective. So you tend to see things and experience proposals and recommendations at a one-on-one scale, and that is what makes a big difference.
The value of virtual reality is being able to get some initial impressions and ideas about a project.
Depends on at what stage of a project you are developing the virtual reality model, because sometimes it makes sense at an early stage, at an optional analysis stage, to develop not so detailed elements of the different options, so people can easily compare between the available options and then provide the finer little details.
A copy of Kyriakos' slides from the presentation is available for members and 2017 National Conference attendees by going to our website.